In this video, we're going to be talking about what your rights are during a traffic stop in Indiana. This is a really important video because this is one of the few times that most of us ever encounter a police officer in our lives. And it's important to know what to do, what to say, and how to act during a traffic stop. So what we're going to do is discuss what you should do if you find yourself interacting with a police officer during a traffic stop here in Indiana. So about me, my name's Nathan Vining. I'm a criminal defense attorney here in Indiana. I represent individuals in counties throughout the state of Indiana, and we'll walk you through what to do during a traffic stop. So let's begin by exploring when the police have the right to pull you over. The Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures, and traffic stops fall under this category. This means that the police must have reasonable suspicion to pull you over if they believe you're violating some traffic crime. And reasonable suspicion, it's a term of legal art, and essentially it means that they must have specific and articulable facts that give rise to that suspicion that they believe a crime has been committed. So things like this would mean erratic driving, observation of speeding on their radar, violation of some of their traffic laws like following too closely, failing to signal, not stopping at a red light. So police officers can pull you over if they have that reasonable suspicion, and it comes down to those specific and articulable facts. So when somebody comes to me and they are hiring me on a traffic case, one of the first things I do is look at why the person was stopped and why they had an interaction with law enforcement in the first place that day. So the first thing you do is observe when police can pull you over and think about whether or not there was reasonable suspicion for the stop. Next, and this is the most important, is what you should do when interacting with the officer. This is where a lot of people make mistakes because here in the US, you have the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. So you don't owe the officer any answers. You don't have to explain what you were doing, where you were going, or anything like that. You only have a couple things you need to do. And one of the first things I recommend someone say is, why did you stop me? Hopefully the officer gives you an answer there. But typically what happens is the officer asks where you were coming from, what are you doing, where are you going. They get information. What they're doing is assessing you. A lot of times, for instance, in an OWI, they're looking at how you're speaking. Is there delayed speech? Are their eyes glassy or bloodshot? So you don't really want to have a conversation with the officer. The second thing you should do is say, I'm not discussing my day with you. You have no legal obligation to discuss where you were going, what you were doing, anything like that. So first, why did you stop me? Second, I'm not discussing my day with you. And third, you want to know, what are they investigating? And you want to know, do you have to stay or are you free to go? So am I being detained or am I free to go? That's the third thing you ask. And then last, if you are detained, you invoke the Fifth. Don't talk to the officer. Don't speak further without your attorney present. So this is really important. These are the four things you should do if stopped. Oftentimes, somebody has an interaction with a police officer and they will spill their guts. They'll tell them everything that was happening. And from an attorney's standpoint, you want a client that invokes the Fifth, that doesn't give information the officer's not necessarily entitled to have. So that's what I recommend you say to an officer if you interact with one during a traffic stop. Next, you don't want to resist or cause problems and not be compliant with the police officer at the same time. So at that point, if you are detained, you do owe the police officer some information. You should provide them with your driver's license. You should provide them with insurance, as well as registration if requested. Giving those things, that's not waiving your Fifth Amendment right. That's just simply giving the officer information to identify you and make sure you're operating the road safely as Indiana laws require, because you have to have the license, you have to have a registered vehicle, and you have to have insurance. So you have to give those things over. So basically, if you're stopped and detained, I would provide those things if asked. So next, hopefully, that's where your traffic stop ends. Best case, the officer pulls you over, you're detained, they give you a warning. Maybe you got an infraction for something like speeding, but this is where narratives can change a lot in a traffic stop. Sometimes the officer may say, well, I smell something, or I believe there's something more afoot here, and they may want to do a vehicle search. This is very important. You do not have to consent to a vehicle search, and in fact, you can and should refuse consent. The police need probable cause that some crime is occurring to search your vehicle. And refusing to search is not an admission to guilt. It's not something that's used against you. It's just invoking your right to privacy, which is what you're provided in the Fourth Amendment. You should definitely, though, be polite when refusing. This is one of those things. You don't want to be rude. When you're invoking your rights, you just simply want to invoke them. You don't want to add fuel to the fire and be rude when doing these things. You just want to be simple. And just to go back and review, you want to say, why did you stop me? I'm not discussing my day with you. Am I being detained or am I free to go? And I invoke the fifth and will not speak further without my attorney present. So ultimately, this is another one of those big important points. There's a couple big things to get from this. First is what you should say, which we just went over, but the second is do not consent to a search. I have so many people who are pulled over and they agree to a search, and ultimately it leads to some crime being charged, when in fact there was no probable cause and they did not need to consent to a search. So let's talk about the probable cause for a search. A lot of times it would be something that you may be admitted to. When the officer's asking about your day, you may say, well, I actually was drinking and there's some alcohol in the car, or I used some drugs and the drugs are in the glove box. That gives the officer probable cause to search. They also will look for smell and then also plain view. Sometimes they may observe things in the vehicle that may lead them to believe there's illegal activity occurring at that moment. So this is kind of what the probable cause needed to search would be. Now, next, a lot of times if it gets to the point of the search, you're going to be asked to get out of the car. There's a specific thing you should do when you're asked to get out of the car. First, this may be the last time your car is under your control, and if it's in a parking lot, you don't want to leave the windows down because hopefully you can leave it where it is and not get it towed. So you want to roll up the windows, you want to take out the keys and lock the car and put them in your pocket. And then next, you just want to stand where the officer tells you, and last, you want to remain silent. Again, it's important to be compliant and not rude when doing these things, but you also don't want to chat about your day. You don't want to admit to things. Ultimately, they're there to do their job, investigate potential criminal activity or an infraction, and you just want to basically cooperate with them while they do that. So hopefully you can be returned to your car and on your way. So next, if arrested, this is also important. You want to continue to remain silent, and you also want to invoke the fifth and request an attorney, because at that point you're not going to be able to talk your way out of anything. Talking's not going to help you. And again, this is another part when you're reviewing criminal offenses and charges and police for people. This is a point where people oftentimes say too much, and they should have just remained quiet, because at that point they're not helping themselves. You need to remain silent, lawyer up, and get the help of an attorney. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview of what to do if you're involved in a traffic. There's, I guess, 3 things I want you to remember. First is what you should say if you have an interaction with an officer. Second is that you do not have to consent to a search. And third is what you should do if you're asked to get out of the car, which is simply roll up the windows, put the keys in your pocket, lock the car, and get out. That's all you need to do there. So again, thank you. My name's Nathan Vining. I'm with Vining Legal. We represent criminal defendants throughout Indiana. And if you have questions or you believe your rights were violated, give me a call or text me. I'd be happy to review police reports, talk about what happened in your situation, and see if there's any way we could provide help. So thank you.